Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, people of the world, and CMR. It's good to be back. I've missed you guys. Right, this is your usual sound test. Can you all hear me? I hope so. And are you ready for some Hpanwo Radio this evening? I hope so, because here we go.
You're listening to Critical Mass Radio. Now, it's our turn.
Hospital Porter's pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hpanwo Radio.
CMR Critical Mass Radio in association with We Are Change Manchester and Freedom Northwest. Please note the views and opinions expressed by the hosts on this show are not necessarily the views held by the station. CMR is for people who want answers, because now it's our turn.
And welcome to Programme 17 of Hpanwo Radio. Hpanwo stands for Hospital Porters Against the New World Order. Tune in for all the latest news, views and reviews from the world of government cover-ups, ghosts, UFOs, hospital porters, paranormal investigation, hidden knowledge, forbidden history and archaeology, chemtrails, and more hospital porters. I am Ben Emlyn-Jones, and this show is intended to be a companion to the Hpanwo blog and Hpanwo TV YouTube channel. Now, that song was Circle of Life. It's from the film The Lion King. I'd say if that doesn't give you goosebumps, then what will? You know, I really do have to ask that question. There's several different versions of that song, and I have to think very carefully about which one to use. That one, of course, comes directly from the soundtrack of the movie, because you can hear the other sound effects. But it's definitely the best one of all, you know, and it's the only one I really wanted to play. God, it's good to be back, I'll tell you, because I skipped my show last week, if you remember. I was away working, and I worked hard, earned some good money. It was quite fun to get away, you know, but I couldn't do my show, and I missed not doing it, and felt I was good to be back. It's fun to be back. It's nice to see you all again. I'd like to say thanks to Reverend George for covering me. He had his prisoner show special with Jerry Cannon. It's on the podcast if you want to hear it. Now, I understand there's been a few problems with my microphone. I hope they're all right now. Yep, I hope you can all hear me correctly. I think it was the mute that wasn't working, according to Paul. So it wasn't the fact you couldn't hear me; it was the fact that you could hear me when you weren't meant to. I hope I didn't say anything embarrassing. I have done on occasions. Anyway, we've got an awful lot for you today, a hell of a lot actually, because tonight on Hpanwo Radio we have an interview with Frankie Ma. Now, she's a good friend of mine. She's a TV broadcaster, filmmaker and comedian. Now, she's best known for presenting On the Edge, which is one of the programs on EMTV. And if you remember in program, I think it was program 12, program 13 I think, or 14. Program 14 we had Claire McGawley, who's the producer on the Edge. So we got another On the Edge person, which is really great. There's quite good timing actually, because on Monday evening, Frankie was actually what can I call her? A contestant? Is that the right word? There's one of the people who went along on the BBC's Conspiracy Road Trip on that program. It's the UFO one. I've written a full review on the Hpanwo Voice. I don't know if I'm going to have time to talk about it long tonight, because we may have another guest. I'm not sure yet. I don't think we have. No. Right. No, okay. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. Also, God blimey, we've got Gary McKinnon is now a free man, more or less, and that's... So we're going to have there's a lot to say about that. It's been a busy couple of weeks, actually, because we've had 2 conspiracy theories proven true, and I'm going to talk about the Hpanwo Facebook group, and much, much more. Indeed. Now, Hospital Porter's pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hpanwo Radio. That was Remember Who You Are, a brilliant song by Gareth Ike. Gareth Ike is a great singer-songwriter and guitarist. He comes from the Isle of Wight, and he used to be in a band called Cody. The band split in 2008, but since then he has enjoyed a very, very productive solo career. Lots and lots of acclaimed singles like Feels Like a Race and What's a Love Without Meaning, which was actually launched in Programme 6 of Hpanwo Radio. And he's got a new album out now called A Brand New Battle, and it's just been released by Ereminos Media. Now, that's a small record label based in Manchester. The producer is actually a friend of mine, a guy called Andy Barkley. Sorry if I mispronounced the name of your company again, Andy. I've done that before. Now, if the name Ike sounds familiar, then it is, because his father is indeed our Dave. And I think Gareth is actually going to be performing his song at David's live show to the Wembley Arena at the end of the month, which I'm going to go to. It should be good. Hope you can all make that one too, actually, because his plans on being the biggest David Icke show ever, and I'm certainly going to be certainly looking forward to that. And if you can get there, we'll meet up. We'll have a few drinks. We'll have some fun.
Hospital Porter's pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hpanwo Radio.
That was Remember Who You Are, a brilliant song by Gareth Icke. Gareth Icke is a great singer-songwriter and guitarist. He comes from the Isle of Wight, and he used to be in a band called Cody. The band split in 2008, but since then he has enjoyed a very, very productive solo career. Lots and lots of acclaimed singles like Feels Like a Race and What's a Love Without Meaning, which was actually launched in Programme 6 of Hpanwo Radio. And he's got a new album out now called A Brand New Battle, and it's just been released by Ereminos Media. Now, that's a small record label based in Manchester. The producer is actually a friend of mine, a guy called Andy Barkley. Sorry if I mispronounced the name of your company again, Andy. I've done that before. Now, if the name Ike sounds familiar, then it is, because his father is indeed our Dave. And I think Gareth is actually going to be performing his song at David's live show to the Wembley Arena at the end of the month, which I'm going to go to. It should be good. Hope you can all make that one too, actually, because his plans on being the biggest David Icke show ever, and I'm certainly going to be certainly looking forward to that. And if you can get there, we'll meet up. We'll have a few drinks. We'll have some fun.
Critical Mass Radio Time to Act conference is taking place from 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. on Saturday, 24th of November 2012 at the Britannia Country House Hotel, Didsbury, Manchester. With 8 key speakers covering child abuse survivors, government cover-ups and the paranormal, what's gone wrong with British policing, what's really happening inside our courts, the trust relationship, debt and the economic enslavement, military basic training and techniques of mind control, how the Constitution, laws and regulations of the EU will enable it to hold us in slavery, and how we have been programmed with language for so very long. This is an event you definitely do not want to miss. Speakers on the day are Albert Burgess, Brian Clare, Tony Farrell and David Note, and CMR's very own Ben Emlyn-Jones, Rob Freeman, Mark Howes and Paul Rippon. The world has reached a moment in time when it has become apparent to those who know how things really work that we all need to unite and move forward proactively as a matter of urgency to try our best to protect our future and that of the planet. Please join us at the very first CMR conference to help make that move in the right direction. And remember, knowledge is power. Tickets for this event are £20 and available via the CMR website at www.criticalmassradio.co.uk. The CMR Critical Mass Radio Time to Act conference, because now it's our turn.
Yep, that's going to be a good conference, well worth going to. As Lisa says in that advertisement, I'm going to be speaking there. Also, Paul Rippon of the Unpenned Show, another CMR host, and all these other brilliant speakers. Right then, who is in the chat box tonight? I know there's a few of you. So Paul's there, hi, and Lisa, hello, and Rob Freeman, hello there. But Rob's cooking a big meal for his kids. All right, Rob. Well, I'll let you off. Just let it play in the background. Lisa, who does all the vocals for these various advertisements, is also a regular listener. Is here. So hello to Lisa. Now I hope there's no more problems with the microphone and all these other things. Paul said I only set up the conference so I could meet Ben. Oh, Paul, shucks. I've not met Paul. I've known him for so long, and. We never met, spoken so many times, known each other for years. Well, we will do this time. Hope you've no more problems with the microphone. Hope you can all hear me. If so, well, that's good. It seems to me that the most important thing is you can hear me when I am talking. And that's why I really wouldn't want you not to be able to hear me when I'm talking. If you listen to me blowing my nose and coughing while the tunes are on because the microphone won't mute, well, that's just too bad. But I hope the sound of my snorting didn't spoil your enjoyment of those songs. I did try to stay quiet during the last one, just in case. Now, if you don't want to talk to me in the chat box, that's absolutely fine. I do have an email address if you want to get hold of me, because I'm always interested in hearing from listeners, and I'll read out any really interesting emails I get. It's Hpanwo, Hpanwo, at criticalmassradio, all one word, .co.uk. And also, there is the Hpanwo forum, which you can always join and talk about Hpanwo-esque things and anything else you might hear on CMR. That's Hpanwo forum, all one word, .freeforums.org. Hope to see you there, guys.
Good day, public. We are anonymous. Operation Jubilee, 5th of November, 2012. Gather peacefully at the Parliament Building, London, to declare the true Jubilee. Cancel all debt, stop war, redistribute the land, and eliminate poverty.
It's time.
With enough faith, united together we can move a mountain. It's going to take all of us. We are all anonymous. It's time to stand up for yourself, your family and your country. Show up and count yourself in the 99% anonymous millions. There can be no forgiveness without true and full repentance. If you do not repent, we cannot forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
Hpanwo Radio News. Right, we've got a hell of a lot's been going on lately, a massive amount, right? Now, if anyone ever tries to tell you that conspiracy theories are never true, you've got the perfect answer for them because of what's been happening this last couple of weeks. Now, people who use the phrase conspiracy, can you all hear me? Yeah, I think I'm all right, yeah. People who use the phrase conspiracy theory as a pejorative term for something meaningless and insane, which is what they do, would do well to remember that conspiracies do exist. They were a constant part of human political interaction, and until they're exposed, anybody who suggests their existence is, by definition, a conspiracy theorist. Now, the Iran-Contra scandal and the Watergate scandal, they were conspiracy theories at one point. So was the dodgy dossier, so was the Profumo affair, so was the Cloudy Bomb conspiracy. These are all conspiracies that are now recognized by history to be true. But before that happened, they'd be conspiracy theories. We don't call them that just because we're looking at them in retrospect. Right, now 2 conspiracy theories have been proved true this week, which I will explain. Now, before then, right, there's something breaking news come out today. Very, very important, excellent news. Gary McKinnon has had his extradition order quashed by the government. there was a hearing today in which Theresa May announced in Parliament that she was not going to support the extradition order. She was going to cancel it. The reason why she said she'd taken medical advice. She looked into the case. She's decided that it would be a breach of human rights to extradite Gary McKinnon to the United States of America for trial there, where he could face up to 60 years in jail under their law. For those of you who've not heard of Gary McKinnon, he's a young hacker, and about 10 years ago he was caught hacking in to the Department of Defense computers in the USA at the Pentagon. Now, he found this remarkably easy, he said. The reason he was doing it was he was looking for evidence of UFOs, and he claims to have found that evidence. Now, whether or not you believe that he actually did find evidence of UFOs or not doesn't really matter. I mean, I happen to think he did, but even if you don't think he did and you think, oh, that's not true, it's just nuts, right? The point is that he was arrested in Britain, and the Americans called for him to be extradited to face, I think, 160-odd charges of criminal damage he did to these computers. Now, if he had been tried, he'd have probably ended up in Guantanamo Bay, and he'd probably never come out. I mean, they wanted to give him a 60-year sentence. He's 46 years old, which means it's unlikely he'd live to ever get out of jail. Now, as it is, I mean, I said he's a free man. Well, obviously, he is still going to have to be prosecuted for the charges he faces, but he will be tried as a British citizen in UK courts if the case actually does come to court, which is not certain yet. And that is a complete other world away. I mean, I don't know what I'm going to get. I mean, I don't know what's going to happen to him, right? This is a question I want to discuss with next week's guest, because we've got Ross Hemsworth on next week, and he's a man who's studying to be a solicitor, and he's virtually qualified, I think, now. I want to discuss this case with him then. But I mean, he may be looking at a year or two or something like that. That's what I've gathered from somebody. If he's lucky, he could be out in 6 months. It's possible they may not even go to trial. We're going to wait and see anyway. But he may still get some bird, but if he does, it won't be very much. It'll be nothing like what he got if he'd been sucked into the black hole, which is the American legal system. So, after a whole decade of struggle by his mother, by his friends, by his family, by his supporter, Gary McKinnon is now free in every sense of the word where he could hope to be. So take hope from this, guys, because I think this represents a turning of the tide. I mean, whether Theresa May made her decision out of the goodness of her heart or not, I don't know. That's questionable, but as I said, they can't stop it completely, and I think we should take hope from this. Right, Jimmy Savile. Now, over the years, I've written several articles about Jimmy Savile, and in those articles, I've praised him. I've called him a great man. I've called him a great hospital porter. Now, I don't intend to edit those articles, because I'm thinking about it is, I've been doing Hpanwo since 2006, and a lot of what I've written about in the past, I no longer believe, and I don't believe, and I think differently now. But if I start editing, I'll get into constant revision syndrome, which is a plague of some writers, and that is very hard work, and it gets harder the more you write. So I'm not going to, you can't really go back and keep editing everything you've written in the past. Now, you could say with Jimmy Savile that's an extreme case for obvious reasons. However, I'm not willing to make an exception even for him. Now, but I just really should make a correction and a little disclaimer for anyone who does read the Hpanwo blog. I hope it will suffice to tell you that I no longer stand by the praise I once gave him. In fact, I find this case particularly upsetting due to the fact that he was a hospital porter. It's so it's just struck me very hard. Now, the BBC have, now this has all come out, the BBC have launched an inquiry into Savile's long career with the corporation. It's all the news, right? But this is amazing. I mean, what blows my mind about this, and should blow yours too, is the time limit, how long he's been getting away with this. The accusations come from people who go back almost to virtually to the beginning of his career, and even before then, when he was a porter. I mean, he's got a we hospital porters, we pick up things, and the rumour going around is that he was quite badly behaved when he was a porter as well, at the Leeds General Infirmary and the Broadmoor Hospital. Now, the question you've got to ask is, for someone who's been in show business for as long as he has, in as prominent a position as he has, presenting many TV shows, disc jockey, since the early 1960s, why wasn't he picked up then? The only way he could have got away, he could have succeeded in doing what he did for so long, is if there was an institution of collaboration protecting him. Now, that is what scares me, and it should scare you too. And I think we have another answer here for the naysayers of conspiracy theory who keep saying, you couldn't keep conspiracies that big because too many people would know about it. Well, a very large number of people must have known about Jimmy Savile and have colluded in keeping it secret for a long period of time, whether they intended to or not. Some of them were knowing collaborators. Others, well, it's questionable about this aspect of the human mind, which means we somehow fall into line when it comes to these kind of things. Because I've had experience of this myself at the hospital, but it does make you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, I've often spoken in the past about how some conspiracies couldn't be real because they're top-heavy. In other words, you need too many people briefed into the secret in order for them to function. But I've now had to reassess my own beliefs on that and to wonder whether conspiracy theories, which do seem initially very top-heavy, might still succeed. Something to think about, isn't it? But I really ought to say something, actually, about another thing I would say about this case is that people in the conspiratorial community have been warning about Jimmy Savile for years. In fact, David Icke mentions it in one of his books a few years ago, and he's mentioned it many times on the news, on his website, and on his headlines. We were saying this years before it was picked up by the mainstream media, and we were ignored and we were ridiculed. And I'd like to ask those who did the ignoring and the ridiculing to think again next time we warn you. Now, I have a horrible feeling that these new revelations about Jimmy Savile may just be the tip of the iceberg, because one thing that has been mentioned in the news, although it hasn't, the implications of this piece of information haven't been appreciated, is that Jimmy Savile was a regular visitor to the infamous Haute de la Garenne Children's Home on Jersey. Now, Kevin Annett, I think he was going to be on tonight. He can't be on tonight now, but Kevin Annett knows all about this, because this has happened in Canada as well. The bones of children have been found in the basement of that place. And is there a connection with Jimmy Savile? Personally, I think we should be more than suspicious. Now, there's a very, very disturbing, very important film made by Bill Maloney called Sun, Sea and Satan, which I advise you to watch because it gives you all the details of that. It's very upsetting. It's rather like Kevin's film Unrepentant, but it's about Jersey, not about Canada. But it's basically telling you the same story. The Hillsborough disaster cover-up. Right, this is another conspiracy theory proven true. How long have the families of the victims of the Hillsborough disaster been trying to overturn this verdict of accidental death, and have been saying that there was, that information was suppressed about it? This is a terrible incident. I'm sure most of you remember this. I mean, it's gone down in history, history of infamy, really, because in April 1989 there was a FA Cup semi-final at Hillsborough Stadium, Sheffield, and almost 100 people were crushed to death in the stand when too many people got into the ground at the same time. Over 700 people were injured. What made this so terrible and so horrific, among the severity of the disaster itself, was that we all saw it on TV. It was on live television, and we saw it happening. Now, just a few days ago, it was revealed that, wait for it, the conspiracy people, quote unquote, were actually right. Evidence was covered up by the police. It was covered up by the other authorities at the highest level, in the emergency services, in the local authorities, in the Football Association, the highest levels, to mitigate their role in the disaster. Now, how many of these institutions are going to actually go to trial? I don't know. Some of them might be innocent, some of them might be guilty, but there's enough evidence to proceed with the prosecution of some of them, certainly. Now, again, are you going to listen to us next time? Now, with all these conspiracies, in the case of Hillsborough, it's a prime example. The media plays an underhand auxiliary role in keeping the truth at bay. Now, the very same time this Hillsborough disaster cover-up was actually in the news, this piece of meaningless and irrelevant trivia about Kate Middleton and her topless photos suddenly appeared, and everyone was talking about it. Now, was this actually engineered in order to knock the Hillsborough story off the headlines, perhaps? Think about that. Because Richard D. Hall, a former guest on Hpanwo Radio, has actually theorised that the phone hacking scandal of last year may have been staged as well to do exactly the same thing over the July the 7th, 2005 London bombings. Do make a mental note of this, because this is more theorising that might eventually turn into factualising. Right, the Hpanwo Facebook group. Yep, several people have been asking me lately, Ben, why don't you set up a Hpanwo Facebook group? Right? And, well, I thought about that, because, well, everybody else seems to have one, don't they? But I've decided not to, for several reasons. Firstly, security. Now, people have often said that one day the powers that be might decide to pull the plug on the internet. I've often heard that. Now, I've looked into this, and I don't think that's possible from what I've seen, because the internet is just very, very decentralized. Now, but it's certainly possible to shut down some of it, or even a large region, temporarily. This is why they cut the underwater cables a couple of years ago to the Middle East. But to cut off the whole internet for a long period of time, it would be like trying to paint over the sky. But to offline one website is the very easiest thing in the world, because Facebook's owners just have to press a button. Therefore, I don't think it's a good idea to put all our eggs into such a sole precarious basket. I mean, I know people who use Facebook for their online life and nothing else. What do they do when there is no Facebook? If they get us all to concentrate on Facebook all the time, then they just get rid of that, and we'll all be cut off from each other. It also makes it very easy for intelligence organisations to monitor us and profile us and attack us with psychological warfare. They don't need us to be all on Facebook, certainly, but if we spread ourselves out a bit more, it makes their job that bit harder, and that's something I want to do. Another reason for not wanting to use Facebook is that Facebook it's a bit of a cultural vandal, actually. It's destroyed a lot of the traditional website community. Traditional? Has the internet really been around that long? But I do talk about the traditions of the internet, and one of those is the forumosphere. That is the old in-house forums. Now these forums, they stand almost empty nowadays. Well, all the discussion keeps going on in the Facebook comments boxes, which is a shame, because the good old forums, are specially designed for discussions, and they have much more sophisticated, much more ergonomic kind of threaded conversations, and you can easily edit and quote and things like that, and they're well designed, they look good. The comments boxes on Facebook, they're very, very bland, they're very crude, and it's not so easy to talk on them. So for this reason, I will not be setting up a Hpanwo Facebook group. I'm still going to use Facebook for socialising, for sharing Hpanwo publications, for answering people's questions and comments and gathering information, but I'm not going to use it for anything else. I'm still keeping the good old-fashioned Hpanwo forum alive. That's a hint, by the way, as I said. Anyone wants to join, you'll be very, very welcome. Right then, stay where you are. Don't touch your dials, because space weather is coming up next. Oh, I love Creedence. Oh, good old howling swamp rock blues. You can't beat it. You can just when I listen to that, I mean, you can almost smell the Corexit in the air, can't you, from that terrible Gulf oil spill. They're still having problems there, unfortunately. Lloyd Pye was saying at this conference I went to that all that area, southern Louisiana, and where the Deepwater Horizon oil rig was, there's a sustainable fishing industry there, or there was. It dates back centuries, and it's been pretty much wiped out. Now that, of course, was the theme music to the Twilight Zone movie, which is really good. If you've ever seen that, it's quite a dramatic film, of course, because there was a terrible tragedy while it was being made, and one of the cast got killed. Apparently it's supposed to say a lot about your personality, which one of the 4 segments you like. Most people like the last one, the one with John Lithgow on the plane. But I love the one about the old folks' home with that black guy who was in The Shining, the psychic man. Can't remember his name. Scatman Crothers, that's it. That's my favourite, definitely. Well, let's proceed with the show. What we got up next? There's all plenty more to come. Hope you're enjoying it.
Chemtrails, child, animal and planet abuse, geoengineering, alternative energy, disclosure, prison planets, Agenda 21, drones, biometrics. This is CMR, Critical Mass Radio, leading the way to stopping the control with proactive hosts, shows and solutions, and informative groundbreaking guests. Critical Mass Radio, the People's Station. Now, it's our turn.
Hpanwo Radio, space weather. Right, we had a new moon last night. It's lovely and dark. But the moon's actually rising at 8:51 a.m. and it's setting at 6:23 p.m. So it's only up in daylight at the moment. And that often happens actually when you get a new moon. It tends to be in daylight because basically it's facing the sun just like we are. So it's on the opposite side of the Earth to the sun. Hence it's up there in daylight. Sunrise, 8:51 a.m., sunset, 6:23 p.m. So the very same time is going up and down with the moon, basically. Sunspots, well, we've got a well-spread belt across the middle. There's a large cluster on the left. There's still no spotless days. Oh, well, when are we going to get a spotless day? Solar flares, right, well, as you know, I've not actually been keeping up with the space weather over the last 2 weeks because I've been off the air for a week, but all I can do is tell you what's been happening in the last few days. We've got a jagged baseline, still very choppy at the top of the B range, so it's still quite a high baseline. There's been a series of flares going up into the middle of the C range just every 8 to 10 hours, actually, throughout the last few days. In fact, just before we went on air, we're just coming down for another one. So there's still quite a lot of activity there. As you know, in a couple of months we're going to be moving into the solar maximum, so you can expect more flares, maybe some effect on the surface of the Earth. Geomagnetic storms in the mid-latitudes. We have a 5% chance of activity. There's a 5% chance of a minor storm and a 1% chance of a severe storm. High latitudes, always higher than mids, or nearly always higher than mid-latitudes. Activity is 15%. Minor chances, 15%. Severe chances, 5%. Near-Earth asteroids. My goodness, I've been missing a lot. Yeah, there's a lot's been happening while I've been off the air. I've really had turned my back at the best time. The forecast has now been extended to December the 23rd, so that's after the Mayan calendar changeover, and I don't know if that's significant or not. But on October the 12th, that's just last Friday, an asteroid called 2012 TC3 passed just 0.2 lunar distances. This means for a short time it was the closest natural heavenly object to the Earth, well inside the orbit of the Moon. It was 65 feet across, so it's not enormous. But it may, if it had hit the Earth, it may have caused a large explosion. And of course, if it happened over a populated area, that would be disastrous. But I don't want to give you nightmares, all right? Because they do keep an eye on these things, and I don't think we've got that much to worry about. Now, everything else is in double figures, more or less, actually, until the end of the forecast. But 2012 TD-79, which is going to pass 7.2 lunar distances. I think I didn't write it down. I think it was the 18th. So that's in a few days' time. It's 160 feet across, so it's a bit bigger. Nothing else there at all to be seen. Solar wind speed is 217.5 miles per second. The density, 0.097 particles per cubic inch, so it's still on the low side.
Hpanwo Radio Space Weather.
CMR Critical Mass Radio in association with We Are Change Manchester and Freedom North West. If you want to spread ideas and information and attend meetings and activities, if you believe in freedom and liberty and want to be part of the change, this is the place to be.
Right, we're going to have Frankie Ma on in a moment, our special guest interview. Frankie's a TV broadcaster, a filmmaker, and a comedian, and she's best known for presenting On the Edge. Now, as I said earlier, she was a recent, as I said, I don't know what the right word is to use. I've used the word contestant. I don't know what else you're supposed to say, but now, at the time I recorded this interview, I'd not seen the program. However, I have now, and I've done a full review. Basically, it is. I suppose it's slightly better than the 7/7 one, basically because there's never been any cases of alleged terrorist incidents committed by UFOs, so there's no heartbroken victims for us to be shamed by and have our reputation battered with evil, nasty conspiracy theorists for daring to try and look for justice and daring to try and bring the real villains to court. Oh dear, and basically the program, I think it was more like what Andrew Johnson calls a muddle-up than a cover-up. There was a lot of confusion. There was a lot of contradictory sort of points they were trying to make. At one point, they were sort of talking about SETI and about how, well, SETI is watching the heavens for various things. We're trying to find signals from outer space, and well, if there were such things as things flying over our heads, we'd see them, But again, I refer you back to the program with Brian Allen. We don't know that UFOs are these nuts and bolts spacecraft. We don't know that they're these more sophisticated versions of our own spacecraft, and they fly from planets that we could see if we had a good enough telescope, and the aliens are all flesh and blood creatures like ourselves. We don't know that. That's an assumption. There's very little evidence that actually says that's true. So this is called the classic extraterrestrial hypothesis, and it's something that a lot of people stand by. We don't know that. All right. They made a lot of statements about Area 51 as well, and they brought in these experts to say how, well, if there was any aliens at Area 51, I would have known about it. There's one guy who used to serve there. They interviewed him, a retired staff member there. Oh, I didn't see any aliens, he said. Look, honestly, there are compartmentalized levels of classification in this top-secret facility. You wouldn't necessarily see these things. I mean, Robert Frost, the man who actually sued the government over his service at Area 51, where he got injured, he said that there were many times when he was forced to go into the canteen and they pulled the blinds down on the windows, and he was just sitting there drinking coffee for a while something was going on out there on the runway and on the apron that they didn't want anyone to see. So, again, you see, this is another confusing thing. I mean, it's worth watching this. It's on YouTube now. It's on BBC iPlayer too. It's worth watching simply as a form of education in that sense. Although, like I said, you may find it annoying. I certainly did. And there's a lot of sort of cliches. There was a guy with a tinfoil hat and stuff like that. So, as I said, it's... I mean, I can't prove anything. And I'll talk about this in the interview with Frankie, but I can't prove anything. But the signs are there that we're looking at propaganda. I would say we are looking at a hit piece that was designed and I don't regret not being involved myself.
CMR Critical Mass Radio is a completely non-profit station where the hosts pay to broadcast their shows. The mission of the station is to get as much information as possible out to people about the world we live in, to unite like-minded people, and to try to come up with workable solutions. If you agree with the work that we are doing, then please feel free to help us continue by making a donation on the webpage. CMR is for people who want answers, because now it is our turn.
Hospital Porter's pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hpanwo Radio.
And welcome, Frankie Ma, to Hpanwo Radio. How are you?
I'm brilliant, thank you, Ben, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh, it's good to have you on. It's good to have you on. Good to talk to you again.
Yeah.
We haven't seen each other for a while, yeah, but you're well known in the conference circuit, so you spend a lot of time mixing with people in the conference circuits. That's how we got to know each other. So tell us a little bit about yourself, about your background and how you got into this sort of business.
Well, years and years ago, about 9 years ago, I had kind of an awakening, and I had the highlight of it was a peculiar vision I had in the kitchen while washing up. And to be honest, Ben, I've never spoken about it before. I'm only starting to tell people now just because it is mentioned in the BBC show, because it's always been a very personal thing. And to be honest, nothing I've ever taken too seriously, but that was the reason for my whole entry into kind of the alternative research area. So I wanted to find out more, what had happened to me, exactly, what was going on with the world. One of the first people I met was John Ronson, who was actually really lovely to me. And we had lunch one day, and he sent me on to David Icke and gave me David Icke's contact details. And I managed to have a lovely 2-hour conversation with David Icke on the telephone, and he was really lovely. Just people were generally really lovely and giving of their time. So then I just became extremely interested into what was going on, and then I met kind of Clive and Lynn, who wrote on the esoteric circle, Lynn Picknett and Clive Prince.
Oh yeah.
Who've written some really interesting books.
They are, yes, they're an interesting couple.
Yeah, and they introduced me to Nick Pope, who had been a long-time friend of theirs. And I ended up getting on really well with Nick. And as you know, it's common knowledge, I kind of lived with Nick for 3 years as friends. And so was really privy to a lot of the UFO goings on, the file releases, answering his correspondence, checking his emails, etc. So that's how I became more involved in the actual kind of UFO side of things. Then Ross Hemsworth, you might have heard of him.
Yes.
Really nice guy.
Yeah.
He sent
I should tell listeners actually that Ross is going to be a guest on the show next week.
Really? I'm a guest on Ross's show next week. Tuesday.
We're quite a community, aren't we? Yeah, I've been a guest. I've been on Ross's show. I've been on Ross's show a couple of times. Yeah, he's a lovely guy. I met him a couple of weeks ago at Bufora. The Bufora conference.
How was Bufora?
Yeah, it was the Bufora conference in London, and he was there. It was very, very good. It was very good. I should tell listeners that if you go to the Hpanwo blog, I've written a full report on that conference. It's a very, very interesting conference indeed.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there are some brilliant people in ufology and in the UK circuit. I mean, I heard that Gary Heseltine's actually going to be leaving the police next year to focus on UFOs full time.
I didn't know that, but I wish I
Oh, that wasn't private information. But yeah, that's what I heard.
Yeah. So this is this interesting piece of literally kitchen sink drama here. Do you want to discuss the actual experience you had? Do you feel comfortable discussing it and giving us the details of what it was like to have it?
Well, I just had a vision, and doing some research on it afterwards, or a hallucination, depending on what your belief system may be. But I think the majority of your listeners we're all kind of on the same level, aren't we?
Yeah, I think we'll take
I
it
think I can
seriously.
speak freely. Yeah, because I'm speaking to the BBC. Because the reason I'm on this show is that I'm on the UFO conspiracy road trip that comes out tomorrow, and gosh, what a time I had on there.
Oh, well,
but,
yeah, we're going to be going into that in a short while. You'll be able to tell us all about that, and we're very interested to hear it. Because by the time this is broadcast, I'll actually have seen it myself, and so will most of the listeners. I haven't actually seen it yet at the time we're recording. But what was this vision like? This vision you saw?
Well, fantastic. I just felt the energy going up through my spine, and then it felt like a part of my brain that I'd never used before turned on. And I felt the serotonin kind of being released, and then I had a full-on vision of the inside of a spaceship city. That's the best way I can describe it. I don't know, precisely what I was seeing, but that's the way it appeared to me. And having done research afterwards, I found out about Kundalini awakening, and it really resonated with me that is probably what I might have had.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's essentially my story, but nothing that I've ever really wanted to talk about publicly, because it is, obviously on the circuit I'll meet people and I'll speak to them about it, but not actually on television or anything.
Yeah.
But that was the kind of deal of getting onto the BBC show, that I had to speak about my own personal experience. But I'll tell you all about that later.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing that with us today, because I know these things are very often very personal, very precious experiences for people, important parts of their lives. So we do appreciate that, Frankie. Thank you.
Well, also, I'm sure as your listeners can appreciate, you just don't want to sound too crazy either, do you? So I always have so much respect for the people that do come out and talk freely about these things. They're extremely brave, and it takes a lot to kind of not deny your own personal experience, no matter how balmy it might sound.
Yeah, I mean, it's the common reaction from sort of academics, psychologists, and people like that is that it is a hallucination. It's a creation of some kind of disorder in your brain, and it's actually these experiences. I mean, they're so difficult to describe, and it's difficult to describe to people. There's no way that could be. It could be anything other than real, because it's described as more real than real, as Andrew Newberg, Andrew Newberg is one of the few sort of scientists who actually takes this seriously, and he's made that good point. You can't use neuroscience to debunk these things when they actually make our everyday waking reality seem less real.
Yeah, there's definitely more to it than I think is currently accepted in kind of mainstream academia and, as you say, neuropsychology. So, yeah.
I've had some strange.
Oh, I just want to say, I used to live in the States, so quite often I say yeah, and people always think I'm saying yeah, but I'm really not that posh. It's like me going yeah with an American accent.
Oh, thanks. I mean, I knew what you meant anyway. It's all right.
Did you?
I knew what you.
Someone the other day told a relative of my best friend, thought that I was the poshest person they'd ever met because I kept saying yeah, but I'm actually just going yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not posh at all. Right.
All right. Yeah. I know you're very down to earth. I know. So do you want to tell us about this experience with the BBC? Because listeners are interested to hear it. Listeners will know that I myself have had a little bit of a brush with them, which I sort of shied away from. But you went ahead and enjoyed. So what was that like?
Well, basically, I decided to look into it and go on the show because I had heard some alarming reports from the people that went on the 9/11 show, most notably Emily gosh, what's her name? Emily, Charlotte,
yeah, and Emily.
Yeah.
And there's Charlie and one other guy, Asian guy.
Yeah, so I actually heard some really shocking things that one of the girls had been edited.
Yeah, Emily was.
To make it look as though she had been rolling her eyes when someone was talking about the kind of carnage that happened in 9/11. And I was just really appalled and getting a bit sick of the fact that mainstream media keeps on using the alternative community as targets and knocking them down.
Very true. And there's an incident where Charlotte was saying that she was describing how annoyed she was by the poor catering, and it was edited to make it look like she was having a row with Charlie.
Yeah.
There's that as well.
Yeah, I mean, she's really lovely, and she's coming tomorrow as well.
Cool.
So yeah, we're all kind of mates, really. So I had several conversations with Claire McGawley, and we decided that I should perhaps go onto the show undercover to see actually what was going on.
Oh, cool.
Kind of offer myself up. Yeah, nobody really knows this, Ben, but that's the truth.
Oh, good.
So
I should point out to listeners that Claire McGawley has been interviewed on Hpanwo Radio, and if you go down to the links, you go to the links column and go down to the archives, you'll see it. Sorry, Frankie, carry on.
That's okay. Yeah, so Claire McGawley is my producer at Edge Media. So, excuse me, I contacted Nick, and he said he'd been helping out with the show, as in they'd contact. He's a good initial contact for lots of TV companies to go to kind of say, who should we get, who's who in the UFO community, can you suggest people, but suggest people contributors-wise rather than the actual guests that go on the bus. So he contacted the company, and they sent me an email asking if I would go on the show.
Right. So carry on, Frankie.
So as I say, we had several conversations about the best way to approach it. We decided I wouldn't actually take kind of hidden camera equipment over to the States, because in case I got stopped going through customs and the BBC would wonder what I was doing with all of this recording equipment. We decided probably the best way would be for me to keep a video diary and actually link up with Claire via Skype every evening. So those were our initial thoughts of why I would go on the show. Then I met the director, and we had lunch, and I asked him, I just thought, actually, I'm going to give these people a really fair chance. So I actually went and met the series producer and everyone that actually works there, and I asked them outright about the editing and about some of the allegations that our community had put forth. And in all fairness, Rita, the series producer, said that I was more than welcome to see the rushes, that it hadn't been edited in a strange way, and that they wouldn't do it. It would be completely unethical, and that not everyone was going to be happy because, it was such a, it's such an issue, such an emotional issue for people. So at that point I said to Claire, I've agreed to go on this show now. It's going to be, from what I can tell, a fantastic trip, and it was. The trip was absolutely amazing in certain elements, certainly a trip of a lifetime in I got to go to places that I would never get to go to and meet people that I would never have met. So that was quite amazing, that what was being offered up.
Yeah, I can see the attraction. I can understand the attraction of that.
I was told that I would have to talk about my own personal experience, but I mean, for me, Ben, I'm not a believer per se. I would say that I was kind of in the Leslie Kane camp as a militant agnostic.
Yeah.
I really think there needs to be more study. There are lots of different theories, but for me, until we know, we know. And that doesn't mean that I discount anyone's personal experience. Yeah. But for me, I like to work from that frame of, well, we know something is going on. We don't know what it is, so let's not rule out anything.
Yeah.
But let's certainly take a closer look at this.
That's a very wise position, actually. I mean, Leslie Kane never comments on what she thinks these things are. She only says, well, they're there, and we have to deal with it,
Well, I mean, I obviously, through Nick, I know Leslie Kane, who is a major Washington player. John Podesta wrote the foreword for her book. John Podesta, I don't know if your guests, your listeners know, is the Bill Clinton's chief of staff in the White House and the transitional chief of staff between Bush and Obama. So what I was told by the BBC, and the reason I agreed to go on this show in good faith, is that I would have to talk about my own personal experience to an extent, because that's what led me to the field of ufology. Everyone would have their own day and people that they wanted on the show, and that the idea of the show is that we would have to put together our arguments to try and convince Andrew Maxwell. And the original email that I got was saying, do you believe in UFOs? And I was thinking, well, that's easy. UFOs exist. They don't even have to be of extraterrestrial or interdimensional origin. That they're recognised as existing as a defence security issue. So that was a no-brainer. I'll win on that point. And one of the other points was, do you believe that there are aliens here on Earth? And I thought, well, that's not exactly me, because I would leave that open, but still interesting. And then the third point was, do you believe there's some type of cover-up? And obviously, living with Nick and being part of, well, not being part of, but being there while the files were being released, being privy to a lot of information through him, while not a cover-up, you cannot dispute that there has been a tremendous level of secrecy. And that some very interesting people have said that there is a cover-up. So I was happy to go on the show in good faith, and I worked really hard, Ben, for the lineup of people that I was going to have on the show for me. And I had spoken to Leslie Kane had agreed to come on, Nick Pope had agreed to come on, Richard Dolan had agreed to come on, Paola Harris, that was basically all my faves from the UFO community. Paola Harris had agreed to come on. I had spoken to John Burroughs because I really wanted to put the Rendlesham Forest incident forward. He had agreed to be interviewed. John Alexander had agreed to be interviewed. I picked kind of like a more conservative bunch than I know that is probably general of the UFO crowd. But I thought, I want to go and present the hardcore conservative case to the BBC, so that, young people who are watching the show can see that you don't have to be crazy to think that there is something in ufology, that these aren't kind of, nutters involved. These are actually high-ranking, incredibly credible people. The other person I spoke to, of course, was Peter Robbins.
Well, most of those people are the names. Most of those people you mentioned are the people I would choose. Actually, they are very, very credible.
Well, they're heavyweights. They're heavyweights, and especially Nick Pope and Leslie Kane, I knew would be fantastic, because they are, media trained. They've done everything from CNN to all the different shows. You give them a soundbite, they can go. They can get their information over really quick, and they're extremely slick. So this is the understanding on why I would go to the show. I was also assured that it was a different director, so the show was going to be completely different from the 9/11 one. And though it was geared towards a younger audience, so we were going to have fun and be a bit silly, the fact that I just thought, well, I can go on and be a bit silly, but the fact that my guests are these heavyweights, how fantastic that Leslie and Richard and Nick will get to go out to that audience in that show, and they get a big audience. There's like 3 million people to tune in to watch that show. So, and then I said to I said to my producer Claire, Claire, they've been really, really straight with me. I don't think I do want to go in undercover. I think I just want to go on and have fun and let go of the attachment and see what happens. Because personally, I don't like being duplicitous, Ben, and I just thought, well, they have actually been really straight and really accommodating. And before I went on this trip, at this point, Ben, I was so excited about the show. I really thought this was going to be a step forward for ufology, because they seemed so sincere.
Well,
I can't believe I was so gullible.
Well, these things. It's very easy to take people in good faith, and you want to trust people. I'm the same. I'd probably. I like to think the best of people.
No, do you know something, Bill? And I have to laugh because I remember the piece of that study that came out kind of last year saying that conspiracy theorists are conspiracy theorists because they're always thinking the worst about other people, so they can believe it will happen. But the majority of people I know who are involved in the alternative research community are people like me and you that take things in really good faith, and then you see it not happening, and you just have to kind of go, well, I can't look this stupid for that much longer. Because I have to kind of change my beliefs a little bit.
Oh, what a shame we didn't have that. We didn't say this hadn't happened before that conference last year in the British Humanist Association Conspiracy Theory Day. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that.
I remember that. Those people, there's Stephen Law and the other. You still there?
Yeah, I'm there.
You still hear me? Do you remember that lady, Karen Douglas, saying, giving a psychological assessment of us? Do you remember?
Yeah, it's amazing. And I was just thinking that's so inaccurate. But then, I have to say, Ben, I can't stand conspiracy theorists. And I know that this has caused kind of a little bit of controversy when I said this on the Charlie Veitch video, but I didn't realise he was actually going to put that on YouTube. So just to clarify what I actually mean, I know a lot of people would consider me a conspiracy theorist, and I'm someone in the alternative research community. Now, for me, there are so many hardworking, amazing people doing brilliant work in alternative research, and they are one group of people that I fully support. When I use the term conspiracy theorist, I'm talking about people who do not check the facts, just come out with nonsense, who see something on YouTube or completely out of context, and they're spreading it around the internet like it's fact. And I have to say, quite often the BBC and mainstream media can be the worst culprits of this.
Yeah.
But I made a video like years ago, and everyone was really upset. But obviously, I had no idea he was going to stick that on YouTube. I was just messing around with a mate. And so I was speaking to someone who knows exactly how I feel. And the fact of the matter is, most people would consider me a conspiracy theorist. I was going to host what most people would consider to be a conspiracy conference. Yeah. And I do, my background is actually stand-up comedy. That's a career I did for years before I was involved in alternative media. And I understand that if you don't know me, you don't necessarily appreciate my sense of irony in that video.
Yeah. So, I quite liked it. Especially when you read the bit in the Bible about someone having a bald head and things like that. I thought it was very funny.
I just can't believe he put that out there, because when I'm messing around with my friends and you know me, it's different to what I would say publicly, and I didn't mean to hurt people's feelings.
No worries. So, Frankie, you've got some interesting information regarding the 7/7 show as well, I hear.
Yeah, well, obviously, when the 7/7 show came out, well, before that, I knew the Renegade, the production company Renegade. So they're not part of the BBC, but they make programs for BBC. And I realised that they were establishment. I had a good look at their website, and I saw that they had done a documentary about the Rothschilds and a documentary about the royal family. So. Without going into David Icke territory, it's safe to say that they're certainly, an establishment company. And I think from a lot of people in the alternative community, I would try and reserve judgment about people until I've actually met them and spoken to them, because you never really know the story until you've met people, and probably not even then. So I didn't have, I had a feeling that it was establishment, which is why the guests I invited to come on the show with me were also very much establishment, because I thought it would fit in quite nicely to what appears to be the ethos behind Renegade. With regards to the 7/7 show, it's funny because the researchers kept contacting me, and there are a few of them, all, I have to say, really lovely. Everyone I dealt with at Renegade has been absolutely really nice people. I don't think that there is a giant overarching conspiracy from them. Certainly, everyone that worked on the UFO show, they were all freelancers, every single one. So they didn't even work for Renegade, and they're just there to do a job. So, I did feel quite bad because I had a couple of tantrums on the trip when I wasn't happy with what was going on.
Yeah.
And I thought it was quite, unfair that they were having to bear the brunt for something that they didn't really have any control over. They were just kind of the middlemen, as it were. But I kept being contacted, and they kept asking me, did I know anyone that could go on the 7/7 show? And I kept saying, no, I don't know anyone in that group of people. And so I was absolutely amazed just before I went on the trip when I was contacted by my girlfriend, Layla, who is on the 7/7 show. And they had actually recruited her by snooping through mine and Claire McGawley's Facebook.
Oh,
and they sent her a Facebook message because they've seen some of her posts. Because she's a brilliant girl. She's very gobby. She's not involved in the alternative scene. And they said, you look great, and I think you'll be really good on TV. And she said, well, I don't know anything about 7/7. And they said, well, can you read up on it a little bit? Can you learn and appear that you do know? And we were laughing as well that she's described in the show as being a journalist, because she's not a journalist at all. She's a model and a tarot reader, and a great girl, but not someone that has any knowledge of 7/7. But they were desperate, absolutely desperate to get people to go on the show.
Yeah.
And so I'm amused when I've seen like lots of comments on forums since saying that she was a government plant. No, she's not. She's just a mate, and they said, do you want to come and do something really interesting and be on telly for the week? And so she said yes.
Well, she's, anyone
who... wrongly, that is the actual real story of what happened.
Yeah, well, anyone who listens to her interview on Hpanwo Radio will tell, she's actually someone who is quite she's quite sort of like, she steps back from the limelight quite a bit, and she's just someone who wants to.
Does, yeah. I'm talking about Layla.
Layla, sorry, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, like you were telling me that one of the researchers contacted you. Yeah, well, go on the show because you didn't know enough.
Well, this is interesting because
I mean more than Layla about the subject.
Yeah, this is an odd thing because regular listeners will know that I was approached by Renegade Pictures to take part in this program. I wrote back to them and said that I would. I wrote back saying yes, I'm willing to come on, but I need. I just needed assurances, that you allow me to. I need an assurance this is not a hit piece. I said because of the very poor quality of programs made on this subject before, I'd like some reassurances, and they didn't reply to me. Now, but since then, since I actually wrote a very brief review of that program after seeing it, I had a comment. There's nothing wrong with reading it out because it's actually posted on the review on the blog. So it just says, "Hi, I was a researcher for that show, and I'm afraid, Ben, that the decision was made not to include you way before you decided not to come on." So in other words, no, you didn't jump, we pushed you. Ha ha ha. And they didn't write back and tell me that, but they're saying it now. Anyway, the reason was we felt you didn't have enough knowledge for the subject, which, of course, as you were saying about Layla, they don't really mind, do they?
Well, she had no knowledge of the subject, and they were saying, "Can you get some before you go on the show?" So yeah, that is quite curious.
There's another. Sorry.
Yeah.
I was going to say this comment also says, could I also point out that Renegade had full editorial on this series, and the BBC only confirmed the final edit for language. They do not have any input into who appears on the show, on the Conspiracy Road Trip shows, and the stars feel that we can help make the show decide for themselves whether to appear or not. So the talk of BBC propaganda for this show is rubbish, I'm afraid. Thanks and kind regards. Does that fit in with your own experience, Frankie?
No, it doesn't, because, and once again, I just want to say, the people I dealt with at Renegade were lovely, lovely people, and so I've got absolutely nothing against them. But after we went on the trip, the director came to my house afterwards, a couple of months afterwards, actually, I think it was. It was quite a long time. And he came in and he was actually quite downtrodden. This is Max Jordan. And he said that a lot of the magic had gone because the show that he was making wasn't the show that the BBC wanted.
Right.
Because he kind of wanted to make, as he said, well, he started off by saying that it was going to be, a kind of serious documentary where both people could present their side. when that became apparent that it really wasn't that, he just wanted to make kind of it was almost like an acid road trip into aliens and UFOs, but quite whimsical, quite gentle, quite fun. But he was told to cut loads of stuff, and they'd been going back and forth with editing from the BBC, and he was actually coming round to mine because BBC had requested that he film some more things with me because they were not happy. So there was a lot of input by the BBC, and I think it's more than just a language edit.
Yes,
that could very generally cover the term. So they're not. It's not that they're lying, but I don't know. I think what really happens there is certainly like lost in translation. Yeah. But I would say, that there is a lot of BBC involvement. Basically, anything that anyone ever does with the BBC, it's always like you have to go before a committee that say yes or no, and there's quite a few people. I mean, I know this because I pitched things to the BBC before from working in comedy, and also Nick had involvement with the BBC. It is a very long, drawn-out process. But anyway, so I went on the trip, and was in really high spirits about going on the trip. When I got there as well, I was so excited that, Brigitte Barclay was going on, who is an experiencer in the UK, who's also a girlfriend of mine. So when we found out we were both going on, we were totally thrilled, and we were like, oh my goodness, it's going to be like Thelma and Louise in the States. This is like fantastic. I get to hang out with Brigitte on BBC Dollar. Darren Perks, who's amazing, and was a witness to the Cosford incident. He was on. They sent me a list of some of the contributors that would be on, who were all, Felisa Wolfe-Simon, who is a NASA scientist, P.Z. Myers, a leading biologist. I was kind of bemused because I thought, well, none of these people actually have anything to do with ufology. Yeah,
I mentioned on the panel, actually, P.Z. Myers was a very, very strange choice of person. He'd been better off going on the one they had last week about creationism. So
I think so, yeah.
So what was he doing on the UFO one?
Looking bemused and confused, pretty much. But this is what I want to say, Ben. So, sent this list of people, and then when I got out to the States, and we're all in high spirits, and it's exciting to be in Los Angeles, I was, in the next couple of days, given the itinerary for what was going to be happening that week, and that's when I had my first massive tantrum. I was just furious, because the itinerary, which I still have here, included weapons training.
Blimey.
And I was like, what the hell does this have to do with ufology?
I mean, I know Americans love their guns, but, this is ridiculous. Weapons training.
And also, all of the people that I had lined up to go on the show. Now, I'm obviously realistic. I knew that out of that list, they were never going to go with every single person, because otherwise it would just be the Frankie Ma show. I mean, there were way too many contributors. So I figured it would be narrowed down to about 2 or 3. So by this time I'm thinking, okay, Nick Pope, Leslie Kane, Richard Dolan to come on and kind of represent, my own personal views. And none of these people were on the itinerary. Instead, we had, and this is no disrespect, but, sorry, again, I'm just assuming that your listeners are as clued in as we are, but it's people, for example, they've got kind of leading scientists like Seth Shostak from SETI, Felisa Wolfe-Simon, P.Z. Myers on their side, and on our side we have weapons training and meeting people like John Lear, who John Lear, none of his work can ever be substantiated. He's really quite far out. And he's not someone that is even particularly embraced by the UFO community. Yeah,
so it was very, very much an imbalance there, wasn't it? Very unbalanced indeed, Frankie, I'd say.
Well, yeah. So I mean, I was absolutely furious, but I was promised that kind of the remit of the show was that everyone would have their day, and my day was then scheduled in right at the end of the show. So I kind of went along with what was on the show, knowing that at some point, I'd kind of get my interviews with Leslie Kane and Nick Pope. By this time, it was down to 2 names, So I just thought, well, I'll go in with the uber conservative side. And plus, one of the guys on the show, really lovely guy, Scott Jericho, who was one of the travellers on the bus. But he was coming out with things like Jews Run the World and all of these things. And it was because of him that we were going to be doing the weapons training. And it was just, it's so frustrating because it's not how I want to see ufology represented. But I hung on in there thinking, well, at least I will get my day in the end. And even if, it's 30 seconds of Leslie and Nick, the people watching will know that it's a defence security issue. It is a real issue, and there is a taboo on any rational discourse taking place. Yeah. Needless to say, at the end of the trip, it transpires that my day has been dropped completely. So I'm not adequately represented on the show. I'm just on the show, basically talking about how, when washing up, I had an experience. So it's just really frustrating. And I don't think they're going to mention that, I lived with Nick Pope, or that I look after the UFO files here in the UK, as I'm now the curator of all of his work here in the UK. Right. So really unbalanced. And also, one of the things that I learned while I was on the show, Michael Shermer, we met right at the end of the show, and I expected to hate him. But actually, he's a skeptic, kind of one of those professional skeptics, like the American version of Chris French. Actually, though I don't agree with everything he says, he was such a nice guy, and me and him ended up going for a drink afterwards, just the two of us. And I said to him, I feel like I've been in a cult for the week. I mean, we'd been taken to Area 51. Now, what you hear in the press is that we all got detained. I actually did not get detained. Me and the bus driver didn't, because I was the only one that didn't follow the instructions. I didn't stay there because I knew it was absolutely ridiculous. And I do feel that everybody else involved, especially my fellow travellers, Darren and Brigitte, Scott Jericho, and a young guy called Ben who had seen a UFO, so he was on the trip too. They came away with a highly romanticised view of what actually went down that day. They could have, including me as well, because I did at one point go across the boundary. We could all have been detained for much longer, for I believe it's up to a year.
Oh, I really would not recommend trying it. It's not worth it.
It's just sensationalism, and again, nothing to do with ufology. But by the end of the trip, I was aware that the scientists, the academic scientists that had been invited onto the show, had absolutely no idea why they were coming onto the show. They thought they were just taking part in a BBC documentary. And then when they got there, it was explained to them that they were going to be, ambushed by 5 quote-unquote conspiracy theorist UFO loons. So, we were completely at cross purposes. And I remember poor Annie Jacobson, who's written a book about Area 51, again, is not something that has been taken that seriously in UFO circles, but she's a very nice woman. She came on the bus, and the poor woman was terrified that we were all going to start, ripping her to shreds. And actually, that's what they wanted to happen on the show, because it makes great sensationalist TV.
Yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, they like to stir these things up. I mean, there is a distrust, because I remember Stephen Law said, he was very concerned that conspiracy theorists were going to attend the British Human Association event. But as it turned out, it was a very, very nice day, and everyone got on really well.
Yeah, I mean,
it's brief aside though.
Happy to listen to what people have to say, and it would be nice if they gave us an equal amount of attention, and the work that we're presenting and the evidence that we're presenting as we do theirs. Because of course, happy to incorporate all of their findings into my own worldview. And I mean, what was interesting to me is that the whole main argument seeming to be the one hypothesis of the extraterrestrial theory, that these were extraterrestrials that were visiting us, whereas the majority of people in ufology don't believe that. It's not a particularly popular view that it is extraterrestrial. We're talking about interdimensional, I would say is more popular these days, or the evolution of consciousness, or nefarious workings by an organisation beyond government. And I don't think any of this was really touched on in the show. But of course, if you just have like biologists and I know Felicia Wolfson is a microbiologist arguing her case. Well, I'm not disputing anything that they're saying, in total agreement.
Yeah.
And I do think that Michael Shermer puts forward some extremely interesting and valid points about how the brain works. So, yeah, I've no issue with those people at all.
Well, I've got some respect for Michael Shermer because he's very much a libertarian. He would never dream of trying to silence people. In fact, he's willing
Such a nice guy.
Yeah, he's willing to debate with
such a good guy.
Yeah, he's willing to debate with Holocaust revisionists and people like that who instead of demonizing them, And I think good for him. That's the way. I like people who respect other people's rights to free speech, and so.
Yeah, he was totally cool, but kind of as well not impressed with his treatment by the BBC. So it wasn't just us quote unquote kind of conspiracy loons on the bus that had an issue with their conduct. It was also, my God, I mean, we work in alternative media, Ben. I can't imagine if I turned around to my producer, Claire, and said, right, can we do a show where we'll invite down some of the leading academics, but we won't tell them they're going to get ambushed by conspiracy theories until they get to the studio. And by that time, they'll already be there and will have paid their fee, kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
So you'd be like, no, we just don't operate like that. So, one expects the same level of professionalism from people that are somehow connected with British Broadcasting Corporation.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was David Shaler himself, who's going to be a future guest on the show. He said that there was a time when the BBC was respected across the world for its decent journalism, and then it's now after they made that several 9/11 documentaries, they've changed. They've completely distorted everything, and they've lost that reputation in his eyes and in mine too, I think.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously, supposed to be an entertainment program and going out on the youth channel. And I just think, my goodness me, and I don't know how much is going to be included in the show, but, is that the kind of thing that we want going out to young people about ufology connected with weapons training, and that it's okay to kind of trespass into a military base? I just think it's wholly irresponsible. But I mean, on the other hand, I do have to laugh. And again, I have to say, I don't think Renegade are bad people. I just think they're kind of, not even thinking about that. They're kind of unthinking and have got a job to do. But, it has made me wonder afterwards, with regards to the BBC and looking at the series as a whole. So looking at 9/11, 7/7, our UFO one, and the Creationist Evolution, that it almost does seem that there's a trend towards certainly mainstream media portraying a materialist viewpoint, and that anyone that goes against the status quo, that there might be something beyond that, or that mainstream science and academia is wrong, is going to be belittled and put down and shown that their arguments hold no water. But it was certainly not a fair fight on the BBC show.
That's certainly my impression. I mean, as you said, they seem to be decent people. You met them and you got on with them.
Lovely people.
And they're as individuals.
But they were freelancers. They were freelancers. Just this was one of many jobs that they did. And absolutely, if I saw any of them again, I'd give them my blessing. Such nice people. So, the actual treatment and the actual trip in that respect was incredible. But yeah, obviously I'm extremely disappointed because I did think this was going to be a step forward for ufology, and it really isn't. And there is still just this taboo on being able to have a proper conversation about it, or knowing or even being able to present the facts. In a really logical, non-sensationalist way, because, with regards, for example, to the Rendlesham Forest incident, something happened to those men which has made, which has ruined their lives. No one seems to be accountable. It's, when are these people going to get justice?
Yeah, it's really is something that does need to be taken seriously, and this series doesn't take these issues seriously in any of the subjects. And like I said, the people there are very nice. I mean, I've got nothing personal against anyone. Even the person who left that somewhat bitchy comment on my blog, I don't bear them any personal ill will. I'm not accusing them as individuals of being any way part of any conspiracy. But when you look at, as you said, when you look at the arc of the story arc of the series, you look at the general themes that are coming out of it. I can't prove any. I don't know. I've got no documents that say this. There is a mandate to make a hit piece and stuff like that. But that's what has been made, and you've got to wonder. Well, it's obviously a deliberate action by somebody to make the film.
Their intention is not to, and this is the discrepancy. I was absolutely told that they were going to make a fair show, that we'd be able to present our side, they'd present their side. And then to hear that all of my people have been dropped, and this is kind of at the end of me being on the trip. And that's when I think you actually see one of my tantrums on camera, but it's probably taken out of context because I was just pissed off by the end of it. It's just like, as lovely as the actual holiday has been, I really didn't need to spend 10 days out in the States. When my whole reason for going out there was the fact that I would go on and Leslie Kane and Nick Pope at least were going to come on to talk about a serious issue. So why am I there? It's just an absolute waste of my time.
Well, I mean,
I had every reason to be skeptical, but I really wanted to go in with goodwill and an open heart and an open mind. And I do kind of feel like it's one of those one-night stands that I'm speaking kind of figuratively now. It's like having a one-night stand with a guy that says, well, I'm not going to use protection, but don't worry, I don't have any STDs and I'll pull out in time. That's what I feel that I've just taken part in. It's just ridiculous.
That's a very, very descriptive analogy there, yeah. I mean, I know I've spoken now to several people who've been involved in this series, and everybody I've spoken to is unhappy with the way they were treated. Now, Frankie, we're almost at the end of the interview now, but do you have a website or anything where people can look you up? I know you're on EM. Are you still on EMTV? Do they still play your shows?
I don't know if they still play my shows. Hopefully. Well, I don't have a website. No, I like to kind of lay low pretty much. But I will. I'm starting to film a new show, which I can't really say too much about. Actually, on Monday, which I'm really excited about.
Oh, great.
Which is kind of going to be a gift, my gift to the alternative community, which hopefully they're going to enjoy. And we'll have much more of a comedy element, I hope.
Oh, right.
So, yeah, but I can't really say too much about it.
Fair enough.
But yeah, we just have to keep going on, people, anyway,
Yeah. Well, I look forward to
and also, seeing the show, I don't want people to suddenly think I'm a government plant. I'm absolutely awful on the show. I have tantrums, but that is, I've told you the story of what's happened.
Yeah.
I had no other ulterior motive.
All right. Well, by the time the listeners hear this, the show would have been played. So hopefully, this is giving a good kind of other side of the story kind of thing. Frankie Ma, thank you very much for being a guest on Hpanwo Radio. It's been great to talk to you again.
It's an honour, Ben. Thank you so much for having me on.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hospital Porter's pride and dignity. Stop the New World Order. Welcome to Hpanwo Radio.
And that was Frankie Ma on Hpanwo Radio. It was a very, very good interview, very interesting, very topical. I urge you all to go to Hpanwo Voice and read my review of BBC Conspiracy Road Trip UFO Special. There's links there so you can actually watch the program. I do always say to people, do watch it, make your own mind up, don't take my word for it, or Frankie's for that matter. But I'd like to thank everyone for listening there. We've had all those lovely people in the Paul, Lisa, Snorby, and everyone else in the chat box who've been listening, and I very much appreciate you tuning in. I've missed you guys, and it's good to be back. Everyone else who's tuned in this evening, we've had some new listeners from places we've not seen before. Great Sutton in Surrey, Shotts in Lanarkshire, Scotland. We've had somebody from Southampton, Barnsley, and Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. I know we've got a listener there because they've tuned in before, so welcome Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. Also Merthyr Tydfil, Wales. It's nice. And Didcot in Oxfordshire. Who is listening to CMR in Didcot? Well, whoever you are, welcome, and I'm glad you are actually here listening to us because if you can wake up in Didcot, you can wake up anywhere. There's nobody in Australia tonight. I've been keeping an eye on the globe, so the jungle surfer must still be in bed. That's fair enough when you consider the time there. Paul Rippon is up next. He's got the Unpenned Show. Should be good. Hpanwo Radio will be back next week. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you with a little bit of KLF. So I hope you enjoyed that interview there with Frankie Ma, and hope you enjoyed the rest of the show of Hpanwo Radio. And we'll see you next week. Take care.